Second habit is that of relate. And so in relate, it's just tell Jesus everything, right? So once we pay attention to what's going on within, then we tell Jesus about it. We just honestly share all those things that are going on with him. And sometimes we may not tell him that because we think it's silly or we don't think it's important. Why would God care about all my problems, the things that I'm dealing with? Or sometimes we might be ashamed of some of the things that are going on within our head, right? Maybe they're not so great thoughts. Maybe they're things that we need to go to confession for that are in our mind. Why would I tell God about those things? But we need to. We need to bring anything and everything to be completely honest. Sometimes I will point out to people, especially those who may have the habit of or the disposition of processing and thinking through things within their own mind. So there's this inner dialogue that's going on, and you're sorting through, and you're trying to analyze things, and you're one step away from prayer, right? You're just acknowledging, and trying to sort through things. Tell Jesus about it, right? This happens so often, when people they'll share with me about things, and like, so how have you told Jesus about that? Oh, I haven't. Well, that's what you need to go do. Because it's one thing to tell me as a priest, and in a sense you are telling Jesus through the priest when you're doing that, but you also need to do that in your personal prayer. Tell him about it, right? This connects too oftentimes with distractions that can arise in prayer, is that sometimes those are the things you need to tell the Lord about. So relating everything to him. It doesn't have to just be Jesus. Jesus is oftentimes the easiest because sometimes he's the easiest to relate to because we've got Jesus present in the Eucharist, or we have the image of him as a man, but we relate to God, to the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. We can also do this for the saints, like Mary. We can speak to them and do that as well. When we don't relate, when all we are doing is thinking about all these things in our mind, what can end up happening is thinking that I've got to be the one to figure it all out on my own, right? I'm the one who has to solve this problem. Once I've solved it, then I'll talk to God. Sometimes that's our way. As soon as I become holy enough, then I can talk to God. Well, it's kind of backwards. Instead, if we do relate, then Jesus can reveal to us what we're to do. Rather than I got to figure it all out, now Jesus can help reveal to us what it is that we do. If we don't relate, we get in our mind that I'm the one who's got to fix it all. I got to fix it, and then we find out we can't. But Jesus is the one who can heal more than we can heal on our own. So if we're trying to fix it and we're not relating, we're just trying to do it all on our own, and we realize I can't do this, then we begin to blame ourselves, right? I'm worthless. I can't make this happen on my own. That's what we're not telling the Lord about. If we are telling the Lord about it, what happens is now we can experience him doing it, right? We can experience, yes, I can't do it on my own, but in all things, for God, all things are possible. So, and that's what's, with regard to relating, honesty is so important, that we become aware and we choose to present to God the reality of what's going on, regardless of what it looks like, regardless of whether it's all nice and pretty or it's kind of ugly and we don't really want anybody to know about it, right? It's difficult because maybe we're afraid of how God might respond, or we just despise what's going on. There's just, I'm so messed up. Why do I want to tell God about all that stuff? But it's in our weakness that we experience God's strength. I can't do it on my own, Lord. I need you to do something. Right? So some background. We're going to go back and we're going to go back to the passage again, read through it once more, and then we're going to be on the relate section here, and we're going to start with how is this woman relating to Jesus? What is she doing? How is she relating to him? And then I'll pause this again and go into some silence, and based upon the things you wrote in the first box under acknowledge, you're going to speak to the Lord and tell him about those things. A couple clarification points here with regard to relating before we go on to the next one is, someone will only begin to relate to God, to tell Jesus about things, if they believe that God is actually there and he's listening, right? If you don't believe that he's actually there to listen, then you're not going to talk to him. So Father Trainer writes in one of his books, he says, "I'm not accustomed to walking into a pitch black room and beginning to chat about my day on the off chance that someone might be there to listen." Right? If that's our belief with regard to God's presence, if we think that when we're praying we're just speaking out into the darkness, then we're not going to last very long in speaking to him, right? And so this, whether it's for ourselves or for other people that we interact with that we're trying to encourage to pray, if that's a belief that we have, that God doesn't actually hear me, then, we're not going to just start talking to the darkness, about prayer. So we need to believe this truth that God is utterly near. This is a truth that comes from our faith. Isaiah says, "Seek the Lord while he may be found. Call upon him while he is near." Right? God is near to us. Jesus says, and he uses the image of the vine and branches, right? "Remain in me as I remain in you," right? This is a closeness there that he is. St. Paul in the book of Acts, as he's trying to evangelize some of the Greek people, he says that people might seek God, perhaps even grope for him, and find him, though indeed he is not far from any one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being. Right? This is how close God is to us. And so, through the course of our Sparks, there are certain prayer methods that can assist us to help feel God's greater closeness. I'll refer to one, our first Spark this weekend. We'll talk about the colloquy and also practicing the presence of God as a couple things that can help us to grow in this area of knowing God's presence so that we actually will relate and speak to him about all those things. It may be, sometimes it's as simple as having a focal point in our prayer, whether it's, being before the Lord in the Eucharist or having a holy image, an icon or something to do that. But we'll flesh some of those things out in some of the Sparks.